Picture the scene from your favorite samurai film. A lone warrior stands beneath falling cherry blossoms, his armor gleaming, robes flowing with every precise movement. It's a powerful image, deeply ingrained in our imagination. But here's a question that might stop you mid-thought. Is this what people really wore in feudal Japan? The world of feudal Japanese clothing is so much more than what we see on screen. It's a hidden language, a complex tapestry woven with threads of status, power, and profound symbolism. What you wore wasn't just about fashion. It was a declaration of who you were, what you did, and where you stood in a society governed by some of the strictest social codes ever devised. Every fold of fabric, every choice of color held a secret meaning, a story waiting to be uncovered. In this world, a merchant could not simply wear the same silks as a daimyo, a powerful lord. A farmer's humble work clothes were worlds apart from the intricate layers of a court noble. To step outside your designated attire was to risk everything. Clothing was law, it was identity, and it's within these strict boundaries that we find some of history's most surprising mysteries. Why did samurai wear specific colors into battle that seemed to contradict stealth? What hidden messages were embroidered into a kimono that only the initiated could understand? How did the simple act of getting dressed become a daily performance of social order and personal ambition? This is the real story, a world where fabric was a weapon and style was a strategy. So we're going to pull back the curtain on this fascinating realm. We're going to unravel the codes, decode the colors, and discover the astonishing truths behind what people really wore. We'll explore not just the stunning visual beauty of these garments, but the incredible stories they tell about the people who wore them, their hopes, their fears, and their place in a world of warriors and emperors. This is a journey into a forgotten language of cloth and thread, and I promise, by the end, you'll never look at a kimono or a suit of armor the same way again. The hidden world of feudal Japanese dress is about to be revealed. To truly understand fashion in this era, we have to discard our modern idea of clothing as personal expression. In feudal Japan, your wardrobe was not your own. It was a uniform assigned by birth, a visual representation of the entire social structure known as the shinokosho. This system placed the emperor and his court nobility at the very top, followed by the shogun and the samurai warriors who held real military power. Beneath them came the farmers, who were respected for producing food, then the artisans who crafted goods, and finally, at the very bottom, the merchants who were seen as merely profiting from the labor of others. From the moment you were born into one of these classes, the fabrics, colors, and silhouettes you were permitted to wear were decided for you. Your identity was literally woven into your clothes. This wasn't just social pressure, it was the law. The ruling samurai class enacted strict sumptuary laws, which were detailed regulations controlling exactly what each class could and could not wear. Think of these as a legal dress code for an entire society. For example, a wealthy merchant, no matter how successful, was legally forbidden from wearing lavish silks or the brilliant colors reserved for the samurai and nobility. He might have the money to buy the most exquisite robe in the land, but to wear it publicly would be an act of rebellion, punishable by heavy fines, confiscation of his property, or even worse. These laws were designed to prevent the blurring of social lines. They ensured that from a single glance across a crowded street or a marketplace, everyone knew their place and the place of everyone else. A person's role, their value, and their power were all communicated instantly through cloth. Consider the stark differences. A high-ranking samurai might wear a kasode, an elegant garment that was the precursor to the modern kimono, but his would be made of the finest silks in deep, rich colors like purple or saffron, colors that were incredibly expensive to produce. His attire might be adorned with his family's man, or crest, declaring his lineage and loyalty for all to see. Contrast this with a farmer, whose entire wardrobe was dictated by brutal practicality. He would wear garments made of rough, undyed hemp or cotton, called mamohiki for his legs, and a short happy coat, all designed for relentless labor in the fields. The fabric would be a plain, muted brown or blue, not by choice, but because vibrant dyes were legally and financially out of reach. The clothing of the aristocracy flowed. The clothing of the peasantry was purely for function. This visible, daily reminder of the social hierarchy was a powerful tool for maintaining order, making fashion one of the most effective instruments of control in feudal Japan. Now, let's focus on the single most iconic garment from this period, the kimono. While we often think of it as the quintessential Japanese outfit, its true nature is far more fascinating. The word kimono itself simply means thing to wear, a beautifully straightforward term for a garment of incredible complexity. At its core, the kimono's design is deceptively simple. It's constructed from straight lines and right angles, essentially a T-shape formed by cutting long, narrow bolts of fabric into panels and sewing them together with straight seams. There are no darts, no tailoring to fit the curves of the body. This seemingly simple design is its genius. The kimono is a blank canvas, a garment whose form is completed not on the sewing table, but by the person wearing it. How you wrap this canvas spoke volumes. There is one rule, a sartorial law that was followed with absolute precision by every living person. The kimono was always wrapped left side over right. To wrap it right over left was unthinkable in daily life, as this was the manner in which the deceased were dressed for burial. This single, consistent practice highlights how deeply clothing was intertwined with the very concepts of life and death. Getting it wrong wasn't just a fashion faux pas. It was a dire social transgression, an ill omen that could ostracize you from your community. But the true marker of your social standing was found in the fabric itself. For the vast majority of the population, the farmers, the artisans, the commoners, the kimono was a practical garment made from humble, sturdy materials. They wore kimonos crafted from rough hemp or, later in the period, cotton. These fabrics were durable, affordable, and ideal for a life of hard labor. They were often left undyed, showing the natural, muted beige or brown of the fiber, or colored with inexpensive plant-based dyes resulting in simple shades of blue or gray. This was clothing born of necessity. For the elite, the samurai, the nobles, the wealthy merchants who found legal loopholes, the kimono was an entirely different expression. Theirs were crafted from the most luxurious silks, fabrics that whispered of wealth and status. The texture was smooth and cool against the skin. The colors were deep and vibrant, made from precious dyes like saffron or the immensely expensive purple derived from the gromwell root. A samurai's kimono might be adorned with intricate embroidery depicting scenes from nature or literature, or boldly decorated with his family crest, turning his attire into a walking heraldic banner. So, while a peasant and a lord both wore a T-shaped robe wrapped left over right, the chasm between their social realities was perfectly illustrated by the very thread that held their worlds together. If you think the kimono was complex, prepare to be astounded by an ensemble that took the concept of layered clothing to breathtaking, almost unbelievable heights. We now enter the rarefied world of the imperial court, where aristocratic women wore not just a garment, but a masterpiece of symbolic art and staggering weight, the junaito, the famous 12-layer robe. The name itself is both literal and a slight understatement, as the number 12 was more of a poetic minimum. Some formal outfits could actually consist of up to 20 individual layers of silk. This was not merely clothing. It was a walking gallery, a deliberate performance of wealth, culture, and status that was as physically demanding as it was beautiful. The visual effect was meticulously calculated. Each silk robe was brilliantly colored, and the genius of the design was that every single layer was meant to be seen. The robes were artfully arranged so that each sleeve was slightly longer than the last, and the neckline was left open in a deep, U-shaped curve, creating a cascading waterfall of color at the cuffs and collar known as the kasein no wirome, or layering of colors. A lady of the court did not simply choose her outfit for the day. She composed it like a poet writing a seasonal verse. The specific combination of colors was a highly refined language in itself. Each layer's hue was selected according to strict conventions that reflected the current season, a specific festival, or the lady's own rank and poetic sensibility. A combination of light green over white might evoke fresh spring growth, while shades of crimson and violet could speak of autumn's maple leaves. A single glance at a woman's sleeve could tell an observer the month of the year, the occasion she was attending, and her level of sophistication. But beyond this visual poetry was a reality of immense physical burden. The combined weight of all those layers of silk could easily exceed 20 kilograms, or over 40 pounds. Moving in a junaito was a skill that required years of training. A court lady did not walk so much as glide, taking tiny, shuffling steps with her body held perfectly upright. Every gesture was slow, deliberate, and graceful, not just as a mark of elegance, but as a necessity to manage the sheer bulk of her attire. Sitting down or standing up required assistance from attendants. This physical constraint was, paradoxically, part of its message. The ability to wear such a heavy, immobilizing outfit was the ultimate sign of privilege. It proclaimed that the wearer was so far removed from any form of manual labor, so attended to by servants, that her only purpose was to be a living, breathing work of art. Her restricted movement was a silent, powerful testament to her exalted position in a world where motion was synonymous with work, and stillness was the luxury of the elite. While the imperial court expressed its status through layers of silk, the samurai class developed a wardrobe that was equally symbolic, but built for a life of duty and action. Their clothing needed to accomplish two seemingly contradictory goals: project absolute authority in the halls of power and allow for lethal efficiency on the battlefield. This duality is perfectly captured in their most iconic formal attire, the kamishimo. This ensemble, reserved for official ceremonies and appearances at their lord's castle, was a masterpiece of symbolic design. It consisted of two main components: the hakama, which are those wide-legged, pleated trousers that almost resemble a divided skirt, and the katajinu, a stiff, sleeveless vest with dramatic, winged shoulders. The katajinu is perhaps the most striking element. Those rigid, squared-off shoulders weren't just a fashion statement. They were a powerful visual metaphor. They created an imposing silhouette, making the samurai appear broader and more formidable, a human embodiment of strength and unshakable resolve. More importantly, the stark, angular lines symbolize the wearer's upright character, his moral integrity, and his unwavering loyalty to his lord. When a samurai donned the kamishimo, he wasn't just getting dressed. He was putting on a uniform that declared his role as a disciplined retainer in a military government. The entire outfit was typically made of linen or silk, and often featured the samurai's family crest, or man, prominently displayed, turning his body into a walking banner of his clan's honor. Yet, this formal wear was only one side of the coin. When not performing official duties, the samurai adopted a far more practical form of dress for their daily lives. This was the kasode, the same T-shaped robe worn by other classes, but with distinct markers of their elevated status. A samurai's everyday kasode was made from higher quality materials than a commoner's fine linen or silk in subdued but rich colors like deep blues, browns, and olives, colors that were expensive to produce but practical. What truly set it apart, however, were the accessories and the way it was worn. The samurai almost always wore his kasode paired with hakama, those formal trousers, even in casual settings. This immediately distinguished him from farmers or merchants, who would tuck their robes directly into their belts for work. Additionally, the length of the sleeves on his kasode was regulated by his rank within the samurai class itself, with longer sleeves indicating a higher station. This daily attire also had to accommodate the most crucial elements of a warrior's identity: his swords. The ensemble was carefully designed to allow for the comfortable and quick drawing of the katana and wakizashi, the paired long and short swords that were the soul of the samurai class. The hakama provided ample room for movement, and the kasode was tied in a way that kept it from getting tangled. This practicality highlights a key point. Even in his relaxation, a samurai was always, in a sense, on duty. His clothing maintained his social distinction while remaining ready for the moment he might need to transition from bureaucrat to warrior in an instant. From the stiff, symbolic wings of the katajinu to the fluid, functional lines of his daily robe, every thread of a samurai's wardrobe told a story of duty, readiness, and unwavering place in the social order. From the symbolic formality of the kamishimo to the practical readiness of his daily kasode, a samurai's wardrobe was a constant performance of his social role. But when the call to battle came, this performance transformed into something far more visceral and literal. He would shed his civilian identity and don a second skin, a portable fortress and a work of art designed for the most extreme circumstances imaginable. This was the yoroi, the iconic samurai armor, and it was far more than a simple suit of metal. It was a masterpiece of functional design, a complex assembly of materials engineered for survival and intimidation on the battlefield. The first thing to understand is that the yoroi was not a single, solid piece of forged steel like the plate armor of European knights. Instead, it was a marvel of flexible construction. Imagine hundreds of small individual plates, known as kazane. Each one of these plates was typically crafted from iron or hardened leather, meticulously lacquered to make it waterproof and resistant to the elements. These tiny plates were then painstakingly laced together with strong, colorful cords made of silk or leather. This technique created a wearable fabric of armor, a suit that could shift and move with the warrior's body rather than restricting him. It offered a remarkable combination of protection and mobility, allowing for the dynamic, fluid movements required for mounted archery and swordplay. The lacing itself, called odoshi, was not just functional. Its color and pattern were another form of heraldry. A samurai could be identified from a distance by the distinctive crimson, indigo, or white lacing that held his very existence together. Every element of the yoroi was purpose-built for combat, particularly combat from horseback. The most common style, the omacron yoroi or great armor, had a boxy, shoulder-heavy silhouette. This design was intentional. The prominent right-angled shoulder guards, known as sode, were large and rigid to protect a warrior's vulnerable flank while he was drawing his bow on horseback. The entire ensemble was asymmetrical by design. The right side of the torso was often less armored to make it easier to draw an arrow fully along the bowstring, a critical consideration for a warrior whose primary battlefield role was initially that of a mounted archer. This focus on mounted combat also influenced the armor's weight distribution, ensuring the warrior remained balanced and secure in the saddle. Beyond pure function, the yoroi was engineered to create a fearsome aesthetic, a psychological weapon meant to unnerve the enemy before the first blow was even struck. This was most evident in the kabuto, or the helmet. The kabuto was a work of art in its own right, constructed from overlapping metal plates and featuring a wide, sweeping neck guard to protect against arrows and sword cuts from above. But its most dramatic feature was often the midate, the crest mounted on the front. These crests could be crafted from wood, leather, or metal, and took on a staggering variety of forms. A warrior might choose a fearsome demon's mask, a pair of stylized horns, a mythical creature, or an elegant symbol like a crescent moon. This midate served as a final, unmistakable identifier in the chaos of battle, a bold declaration of the warrior's identity, his clan, and even his personal bravery or spiritual beliefs. The entire ensemble, the rustling, lacquered plates, the imposing helmet, the vivid lacing was designed to transform the samurai from a man into a mythical, terrifying figure, a being of both immense martial power and profound cultural significance. So far, we have explored the world of the elite, a realm of silk, layered symbolism, and armor that turned warriors into living legends. But to truly understand feudal Japan, we must now step out of the castle courtyards and into the fields, where the vast majority of the population lived and worked. The farmers, the peasant class, formed the very backbone of the entire society, and their clothing was a world apart from the finery of the nobles and samurai. Where elite fashion was an expression of power and culture, the attire of the farmer was a testament to pure, unadulterated practicality. Every stitch, every fiber, was in service to one overwhelming reality: the necessity of survival through back-breaking labor. Their clothing was born from the materials they had at hand. While the upper classes wore delicate, expensive silks, the farmer's wardrobe was woven from humble, sturdy plants. The most common fabric was hemp, a tough and resilient fiber that could withstand the rigors of daily life in the mud and sun. Later in the period, cotton became more widespread, offering a slightly softer alternative, but the principle remained the same: durability was everything. These were not fabrics chosen for their beauty or sheen, but for their ability to last through seasons of planting, tending, and harvesting. The colors of their world were equally dictated by pragmatism and poverty. Vibrant dyes were legally restricted and financially impossible, so farmers relied on readily available, inexpensive coloring agents. The most iconic of these was the indigo plant, which produced a range of deep, inkai blues. This indigo blue was not just a color, it was a functional choice, as the dye was believed to strengthen the fabric and even repel insects. Other common hues were simple browns and muted grays, derived from local barks and clays, resulting in an earthy, subdued palette that blended seamlessly with the soil they worked. The fundamental garment for a farming man was a simple ensemble built for maximum mobility and comfort. His base layer was often the fundoshi, a versatile loincloth that provided essential support and freedom of movement. Over this, he would wear a short kimono, typically called a hapi or kasode, that was cut much shorter than the flowing robes of the elite, often reaching only to the mid-thigh. This was not a garment for ceremony, it was a tool. He would then tuck the hem of this short robe into a pair of mamohiki, which were tight-fitting, long underpants that functioned like work trousers, protecting his legs from the elements and rough undergrowth. The entire outfit was designed to stay out of the way, to avoid snagging on tools or being weighed down by mud and water. For a farming woman, the principles were identical, though her base garment was a full-length kimono. However, she would ingeniously adapt it for labor by using a sash or cord called a kashimaki to hike the skirt of the kimono up and tuck it securely at her waist. This created a blousand effect that kept the expensive fabric from dragging on the ground while giving her the legroom needed for planting rice, weaving, or any of the countless other tasks that filled her day. Perhaps the most telling aspect of their clothing is that it was often a product of the home. While a lord's silks were commissioned from master weavers and a samurai's armor was assembled by specialized craftsmen, a farmer's clothes were frequently spun, woven, sewn, and dyed by the women of his own household. The entire process, from plant to garment, was a domestic skill, a necessary part of the family's economy. This self-sufficiency meant that clothing was deeply personal and intensely practical, with repairs and patches being a common sight. There was no concept of fashion trends or seasonal collections. A garment was worn until it could no longer be mended, and even then, the rags might find a second life. This stark contrast in the very origin of clothing, the home-spun hemp versus the commissioned silk, perfectly illustrates the chasm between these two worlds. The farmer's attire was not a symbol of who he aspired to be, but a direct and honest reflection of the life he was born to live, a life where every thread was connected to the earth. As we move from the muddy rice fields into the bustling streets of the castle towns, we encounter two classes whose relationship with clothing was uniquely complex and fraught with contradiction. These were the artisans and the merchants, positioned just above the farmers but legally beneath the samurai in the rigid social hierarchy. This position created a fascinating sartorial tension. By the later feudal period, particularly during the prosperous Edo era, many merchants had amassed staggering fortunes, their wealth often dwarfing that of the cash-strapped samurai who were their social superiors. An artisan, a master craftsman in lacquerware or textiles, could also command a high price for his skills. Yet, the sumptuary laws we discussed earlier stood as an immovable wall between their economic reality and their social expression. They had the money, but they were legally forbidden from using their clothing to publicly display it. This created a world of quiet rebellion and ingenious subtlety. On the surface, an affluent textile merchant and a humble carpenter might appear similarly dressed. Both would wear the practical short kasode and hakama trousers suitable for urban life and work. The difference was not in the cut or style, which had to remain within legal bounds, but in the secret details known only to the wearer and those with a discerning eye. The true display of wealth moved from the public spectacle to the private whisper. A merchant's outer robe might be made of a respectable, legally permissible dark blue cotton, but its lining, the part hidden from the censor's gaze, could be crafted from the most exquisite, extravagantly patterned silk. He would experience that luxury against his skin, a personal secret of affluence. Similarly, an artisan might own a set of tabi socks with soles made of soft, supple deerskin instead of the standard tough canvas. A small indulgence in comfort that signaled disposable income without breaking any visible laws. This environment of restriction and hidden wealth gave birth to a powerful and enduring aesthetic philosophy known as Ikki. Pronounced Ikki, this concept is difficult to translate directly, but it encapsulates an ideal of refined, understated chic. It was the merchant class's artistic and cultural response to their political powerlessness. Ikki rejected the overt opulence of the court nobility and the stiff formality of the samurai. Instead, it celebrated sophistication through subtlety, suggesting wealth and taste rather than blatantly proclaiming it. Think of a kimono in a muted, slate-gray color, but dyed using a complex and expensive technique that gives the fabric a deep, luminous depth. Or imagine an accessory like an intricately carved tobacco pouch or a hairpin of rare wood, whose beauty is only revealed upon close inspection. This was not about being cheap or plain. It was about achieving an aura of effortless elegance and worldly knowledge. It was a cultivated awareness that true style often lies in what is withheld, in the quiet confidence that doesn't need to shout. This sophisticated aesthetic found its perfect stage in the pleasure districts of cities like Edo and Kyoto. In the vibrant, floating world of the ukiyo-e, merchants and wealthy townsmen were the primary patrons. Here, outside the strictest scrutiny of the samurai magistrates, fashion could be more expressive. The celebrated courtesans and geisha of these districts became the ultimate trendsetters of Ikki, wearing kimonos with clever, subtle patterns and artfully layered collars that spoke a language of allure and refinement understood by their discerning clientele. For the aspiring merchant, to appreciate and embody Ikki was to claim a different kind of status, not one granted by birth or law, but one earned through cultural literacy and financial acumen. Their clothing, therefore, became a complex negotiation, a public performance of legal compliance and a private, or subtly coded, declaration of their true place in the evolving economic landscape of feudal Japan. Now, let's take a step down from the grand ensembles and intricate layers to the very ground beneath their feet. Footwear in feudal Japan tells its own compelling story of practicality, class, and ingenious design, because what you wore on your feet was just as revealing as the robe on your back. The most common, almost universal, piece of footwear was the humble waraji. These were sandals, but not the kind we might think of for a day at the beach. They were crafted from woven rice straw, a material that was plentiful, cheap, and surprisingly durable for its purpose. The design was simple and effective, a flat sole made from braided straw ropes, with loops through which the wearer would thread braided cords to tie the sandal securely onto their bare feet, lacing the cords up around their ankles. The waraji was the shoe of the common man and the warrior alike, the go-to footwear for travel and hard labor. A farmer would wear them in the fields, a messenger would run miles in them on the country roads, and a samurai on a long march would carry several spare pairs, as the straw soles would wear out relatively quickly and need frequent replacement. This disposability was part of its genius. It was a truly recyclable product of an agrarian society. The way they were worn also signaled intention. A traveler, setting out on a journey, would tie the cords tightly and neatly. But if you came across someone with the cords casually untied or dragging, it was a silent signal that they were taking a rest, a small but widely understood piece of nonverbal communication. For more formal occasions or daily wear in drier, cleaner environments, people turned to the zori. These were also sandals, but they represented a step up in both formality and construction. While waraji were open and strappy, Zori had a more solid, often flat, sole and a single V-shaped thong, known as a hanao, that passed between the big toe and the second toe. The simplest zori were like waraji, made from rice straw, but you could find more refined versions woven from softer sedge grass, or even luxurious ones crafted from leather or brocaded silk for the upper classes. The zori was the appropriate footwear for wearing with a full kimono when visiting someone's home or for formal gatherings, as they were easier to slip on and off than the laced-up waraji and were considered more presentable. Then we have the most distinctive and architecturally fascinating footwear of the era, the geta. These are the iconic wooden clogs, instantly recognizable by their two vertical wooden blocks on the underside, which elevate the wearer a few inches off the ground. The primary function of this unique design was intensely practical. In an age of unpaved streets, dirt paths, and variable weather, the geta acted as stilts for your kimono. They kept the delicate, expensive hem of a long kimono, whether it was a fine silk one or a commoner's humble cotton robe, clean and dry, lifting it safely above the mud, puddles, and dirt. The sound of geta on cobblestones, that distinctive Karen koran clack, was the sound of a bustling town. They were worn by all classes, from geisha in the entertainment districts to fishmongers in the market, though again, the quality of the wood, the lacquer finish, and the decoration of the hanao thong would loudly proclaim the wearer's status. A wealthy merchant might wear geta made of precious paulownia wood, exquisitely lacquered in black with a velvet hanao, while a laborer's would be plain, unfinished cedar. But no discussion of this footwear is complete without the essential companion to all of it, the tabi. These are the unique split-toe socks, a design that is quintessentially Japanese. Tabi are crucial because they are designed with a separation between the big toe and the other toes, perfectly accommodating the hanao thong of both zori and geta. They were typically made from cotton or, for the wealthy, silk, and were often white for formal occasions, though you could find dark blue or black for everyday use. Wearing zori or geta without tabi was considered highly informal, something you might only do in the privacy of your own garden. The tabi itself became another subtle canvas for displaying wealth and taste. While a samurai might wear stark white tabi as part of his formal wear, a fashionable townsman might secretly own a pair with his family crest subtly embroidered on the back, or with soles made of a softer, more expensive leather. From the functional straw of the waraji to the elevated practicality of the geta, every step taken in feudal Japan was a testament to a culture that considered every detail, from the ground up. Just as the fabrics and footwear told a story, the hair on one's head and the hat that covered it were equally powerful communicators of identity and social standing in feudal Japan. Hairstyles were not a matter of personal taste, but were strictly dictated by class, profession, and occasion, governed by conventions just as rigid as the sumptuary laws for clothing. From the most elaborate courtly coiffures to the practical cuts of the laborer, your hair was a public declaration for all to see. The most instantly recognizable hairstyle from this era is without a doubt the samurai's chanmage, the distinctive topknot. While we often associate it with a completely shaved pate, the classic chanmage was actually more complex. The hair on the crown of the head was kept long and oiled, then drawn up into a tight, forward-turning topknot that was secured with a paper cord. The front and sides of the head were often shaved clean, not merely for style, but for profound practical reasons that originated on the battlefield. Inside a hot, heavy helmet or kabuto, the shaved areas provided crucial ventilation and helped prevent irritation and excessive sweating. More importantly, the topknot acted as a natural anchor. The helmet's interior was designed to fit snugly over the knot, helping to stabilize the heavy headpiece and keep it from shifting or falling off during the violent movements of combat. It was, in essence, a vital piece of a warrior's equipment. Yet, as the feudal period progressed and Japan entered a long era of peace under the Tokugawa shogunate, the samurai's role shifted from a constant state of war to that of a bureaucrat and administrator. The chanmage evolved with this change. It lost none of its symbolic power, but its practical military function became largely ceremonial. The top knot transformed into the ultimate badge of the samurai class, a right that no commoner could legally assume. To wear a chanmage was to announce to the world that you were a member of the warrior elite, a man of honor and duty. Its meticulous grooming signaled discipline and self-respect. During the peaceful Edo period, the style became even more elaborate, with variations in the shape and size of the knots sometimes indicating a samurai's specific clan or rank. Maintaining this hairstyle was a daily ritual, a constant reaffirmation of one's place at the top of the social order. In the rarefied air of the imperial court, hairstyles reached a level of complexity and symbolism that rivaled the famous 12-layer robes. For aristocratic women, the subarakashi was a breathtakingly elaborate creation. This wasn't just a hairdo, it was an architectural feat. The hair was grown exceptionally long and then dressed with special oils and waxes to achieve a glossy, flowing appearance. It was parted in the center and allowed to fall straight down the back, often reaching far past the waist, sometimes even trailing on the ground. The ideal was hair so long and lustrous it was compared to a black waterfall. This style required an immense amount of time and the assistance of skilled attendants to achieve, and its maintenance was a full-time occupation. For a noblewoman, such hair was a direct indicator of her status. It was utterly incompatible with any form of manual labor and proclaimed a life of leisure and refinement. For formal occasions, it would be accessorized with intricate hairpins, combs, and ornaments made of tortoiseshell, lacquered wood, and precious metals, each piece carrying its own symbolic meaning. For commoners, the reality was predictably practical. A farmer or artisan simply did not have the time or resources for such elaborate grooming. Men typically wore their hair in a simple, loose knot or tied back in a short ponytail for work, only adopting a more formal, albeit simpler, version of the chanmage if they were elevated to a position of village authority. Commoner women wore their hair tied up in straightforward, functional styles like the tabo, a knot at the back of the head, or the mage, a simple chinyan. These styles kept their hair securely out of the way while they worked in the fields, managed households, or crafted goods. Their hair ornaments, if they had any at all, were simple and made of wood or bone, a world away from the gold and tortoiseshell of the aristocracy. Headgear provided the finishing touch to this hierarchical display, serving both practical and profound ceremonial purposes. For protection against the elements, the most ubiquitous item was the kasa, a general term for a wide variety of woven hats. These conical hats, typically made from rice straw, bamboo, or sedge, were the universal shield against sun and rain for every class. A traveler, a farmer in the field, or a pilgrim on a long journey would all wear a kasa. The quality of the weave and the materials, however, would again signal status. A laborer's kasa would be coarse and purely functional, while a wealthy merchant might own one of finely woven sedge with a silk cord. In the realm of formality, no item was more significant than the eboshi. This was a lacquered paper cap, stiffened into a distinct shape, and it was an essential component of formal attire for aristocratic men and high-ranking samurai. The eboshi came in several styles, each denoting a specific rank or occasion. The most dramatic was the tate eboshi, or standing eboshi, a tall, black, peak-like cap that was worn by court nobles and the shogun himself. Its impressive height made the wearer appear more imposing. Samurai typically wore the katsura eboshi, a more rounded and subdued version. The act of donning the eboshi was a rite of passage. There was even a special ceremony called genpuku, where a young samurai, usually in his early teens, would be presented with his first eboshi and adult name, officially marking his entry into manhood and the warrior class. To be without one in a formal setting was unthinkable. From the practical kasa to the symbolic eboshi, what one placed upon one's head was the final, undeniable punctuation mark on a sentence of social identity written across the entire body. But beyond the silhouette and the fabric, the most sophisticated and carefully regulated language of all was woven directly into the cloth itself through patterns and, most importantly, the family crests known as man. If you learn to read this visual code, a simple kimono transforms from a beautiful garment into a detailed biography of the wearer, announcing their family, their loyalties, and even the very season they were celebrating. This system of man is one of the most elegant and enduring examples of heraldry in the world, a minimalist art form where a single, stylized symbol could carry the weight of an entire clan's history and honor. A man is not a detailed, realistic picture. Instead, it is a highly abstracted and symbolic design, often based on elements from nature, geometry, or mythology, rendered in a single color, typically white on a dark background or vice versa. You might see a stylized Paulownia flower, a circle of 3 hollyhock leaves, a delicate butterfly, or even something as simple as interlocking rings. The genius of the man lies in its simplicity and scalability. It needed to be recognizable whether it was embroidered on the sleeve of a kimono, painted on a soldier's banner, or carved onto the roof of a palatial home. For the samurai class, these crests were absolutely paramount. A samurai's kamishimo or formal kimono would almost always feature his family's man prominently displayed. This was a matter of identity and allegiance. On the battlefield, it allowed for instant recognition amidst the chaos. In the halls of power, it was a constant reminder of one's lineage and the daimyo, or feudal lord, to whom one owed unwavering loyalty. To wear your man was to wear your family's soul. The placement and number of these crests on a garment were not arbitrary. They followed a strict code that communicated the formality of the occasion. This is where the language becomes incredibly precise. The most formal outfit possible was known as mantsuki, which literally means bearing crests. The highest level of formality, reserved for the most solemn ceremonies like audiences with the shogun or a wedding, featured 5 crests. You would find one centered on the back of the garment, directly between the shoulder blades, and one on each sleeve, just above the elbow. The final 2 were placed on the chest, symmetrically over each breast. This quintessential placement left no doubt about the importance of the event. A step down in formality was the 3-crest arrangement. This was still a highly respectable and formal style, often worn for important social gatherings or official duties that fell just short of the utmost state functions. The crests were typically placed on the back and on each sleeve, omitting the 2 on the chest. Finally, the single crest kimono, with just one man on the back, represented a more casual formality. It was the kind of outfit a samurai might wear for a dinner with close associates or a less rigidly ceremonial event within his own clan. This nuanced system meant that a person's intentions and the perceived importance of a gathering were communicated silently the moment they entered a room, all through the number of family emblems they displayed. Yet, the narrative woven into clothing extended far beyond the formal declaration of family crests. The entire field of the kimono served as a canvas for artistic expression and poetic illusion through seasonal motifs. This was a culture deeply attuned to the passing of the year and the beauty of the natural world, and this sensitivity was reflected in what people wore. A kimono was never just a piece of clothing. It was a wearable ode to a specific moment in time. A spring kimono might be decorated with cascading cherry blossoms, or sakura, symbolizing the breathtaking but fleeting nature of life. A summer robe could feature swirling streams, irises, or the delicate firefly, evoking a sense of coolness and evening beauty. As autumn approached, you would see patterns of maple leaves in vibrant reds and golds, chrysanthemums, or even geese flying south. Winter brought designs of bamboo and pine trees, symbols of resilience, or intricate snowflake patterns known as koyo. Wearing a motif out of season was considered a significant faux pas, a sign of being culturally unsophisticated. This practice, known as kaitsu no arumano, or things that have a season, ensured that an individual's attire was in harmony with the world around them. For the elite, this was another layer of cultural one-upmanship. A court lady might choose a combination of autumn grasses that referenced a specific classical poem, signaling her education and refinement to those who understood the reference. For the wealthy merchant, even if his outer garment was a legally permissible dark color, the lining could explode in a beautiful, seasonally appropriate pattern of wisteria or peonies, a hidden garden of luxury known only to him and his intimates. This intricate dance of crests and seasons reveals a society where clothing was never passive. It was an active, living document, a complex and beautiful language spoken in silk and thread, declaring who you were, where you came from, and your place in the eternal cycle of nature and society. But amidst the intricate language of family crests and seasonal motifs, there was an even more immediate and universal vocabulary at play, the profound and often legally enforced symbolism of color itself. In feudal Japan, color was never merely decorative. It was a potent, silent language that communicated rank, spirituality, and emotion with an intensity we can scarcely imagine today. The very pigments used to create a vibrant hue were often rare, difficult to produce, and staggeringly expensive, which immediately made certain colors the exclusive domain of the powerful. This wasn't a matter of preference. It was a rigid system of social coding where wearing the wrong shade could be a serious transgression. At the very pinnacle of this chromatic hierarchy was a color so exclusive it was synonymous with the divine authority of the emperor himself, Kobai-iro, a vivid saffron yellow. Derived from the precious saffron crocus, this brilliant, sun-like hue was legally reserved for the emperor and the highest echelons of the imperial family. To see this color approaching in a procession was to witness the apex of the social order in motion. It represented the center of the universe, the source of light and life, and its use by anyone else was utterly unthinkable. Just a step below was the color purple, specifically a deep, reddish purple known as murasaki. Produced from the root of the difficult-to-cultivate gromwell plant, this color was historically associated with the highest ranks of the court nobility. In the ancient Teiho Code, laws even specified which shades of purple corresponded to which official court rank, creating a precise gradient of power expressed in shades of violet. A deeper, richer purple signified a more exalted position, making the court a living tapestry of nuanced status. For the samurai class, the colors that defined them were equally symbolic, but reflected their martial world. Deep blue, known as kan, made from the indigo plant, was a staple. While indigo was used by commoners for its practicality, the samurai adopted the darkest, most intense shades of this blue, which came to symbolize fidelity, steadfastness, and a calm, unwavering resolve. Even more significant was a deep, blood-red hue called hai. This powerful color was associated with strength, passion, and sacrifice qualities essential to the warrior's code of Bushido. A samurai might wear a red under kimono, or juban, as a private reminder of his willingness to shed blood in service to his lord. You see this vividly in the lacing of their armor. Crimson odoshi cords were a popular and bold choice, transforming the warrior into a figure of both terror and honor on the battlefield. These colors weren't just chosen for their striking appearance. They were an integral part of the samurai's identity, visually proclaiming his courage and loyalty. However, the most sophisticated and poetic use of color was undoubtedly the art of the layered robe, the kasein no irome, practiced by aristocratic women. This was not simply wearing multiple colors, it was the composition of a seasonal poem without a single spoken word. A court ladies' ensemble consisted of numerous silk robes, each one slightly thinner and shorter than the last, arranged so that the edges of each sleeve and the layered collars at the neck created a cascading, vertical spectrum of color. The specific combination of these hues was called a kasein, or color scheme, and each had a name and a specific poetic meaning tied to a season, a time of day, or a natural phenomenon. For instance, a combination known as yanagi machi layers featuring willow green over white, with a hint of red peeking through, was a quintessential representation of early spring. The green evoked the first willow buds, the white suggested lingering snow or a crisp spring morning, and the hidden red hinted at the warmth of the coming sun. Another ensemble, called kobai, might layer pink over plum pink over red, creating a stunning visual metaphor for the blossoming of plum trees in late winter. To wear a kasein that was out of season would be as jarring and socially inept as reciting a poem about autumn leaves during a cherry blossom viewing party. The ability to create and recognize these intricate color combinations was a mark of the highest cultural refinement. It was a silent conversation between women of status, a demonstration of their education, their sensitivity to the natural world, and their mastery of a form where fashion, poetry, and painting merged into a single, breathtaking art form worn on the body. While the world of adults was governed by strict rules of class and occasion, the realm of children's clothing offers a fascinating glimpse into a society's hopes, fears, and profound superstitions. At first glance, it might seem that children were simply dressed as miniature adults, and to a large extent, this was true. A child's garment followed the same fundamental T-shape and structure as their parents' clothing. However, woven into these small robes were powerful cultural beliefs and rituals designed not just to clothe a child, but to actively protect them and guide their path into adulthood. Their attire was a charm, a prayer made visible, reflecting a deep-seated anxiety in an era where childhood survival was never guaranteed. One of the most striking traditions was reserved for young boys from samurai and aristocratic families. Before their official coming-of-age ceremony, known as genpuku, which typically occurred between the ages of 10 and 15, these boys were dressed in a style that seems almost counterintuitive to modern eyes. They wore incredibly vibrant and ornate clothing that closely mirrored the lavish fashions of the high-end court nobles from centuries past. Imagine a young boy not in subdued warrior-like tones, but in a brilliant, colorful cassoed robe with long, flowing sleeves, often in shimmering silks of saffron, crimson, or violet. His hair would be styled long and loose, or in a softer, more childlike manner, distinctly different from the shaved pate and topknot of an adult samurai. This practice was known as hoi, and it was deeply symbolic. By dressing a boy in the opulent style of the ancient court, his family was placing him in a sort of ritualistic and social limbo. He was not yet burdened with the severe duties and identity of the warrior class. This period was seen as a fleeting time of innocence, a protected space where he could be celebrated as a cherished child, adorned in beauty before he had to take on the sobering responsibilities of a life dedicated to martial discipline and loyalty. The genpuku ceremony itself was a powerful transformation. It was during this event that his childhood long hair was cut. He was given his adult name, and he donned his first eboshi cap and adult samurai attire, often presented by an influential patron. In that single day, the vibrant, courtly child disappeared, and a young man of the warrior class emerged. Beyond these social rituals, the fabric of a child's world was literally imbued with magic. In a time of high infant mortality, parents relied on more than just medicine. They turned to spiritual safeguards woven directly into their children's clothes. Certain patterns, motifs, and colors were universally believed to possess the power to ward off evil spirits, malevolent forces, and illness. The most powerful and ubiquitous of these protective charms was the pattern of small, interlocking diamonds known as shippo. This design, whose name translates to 7 treasures from Buddhist scripture, symbolized the harmony of the universe and was thought to create a spiritual net that evil could not penetrate. You would find this pattern embroidered on a child's kimono or woven into the fabric itself, creating a constant, protective barrier around their small body. Another common motif was the sayagata, a continuous, swastika-like pattern that has ancient roots as a solar symbol and a sign of good fortune in many Asian cultures. Far from the negative connotations it later acquired in the West, the sayagata in feudal Japan was a potent emblem of auspiciousness and the unfolding of universal harmony, believed to deflect misfortune. Creatures from folklore also served as guardians. The tortoise, or kame, with its long life, symbolized longevity and resilience. Cranes, or tsuru, represented 1,000 years of life and happiness. Having these creatures depicted on a child's robe was a parent's heartfelt prayer for their child to live a long, healthy life. Even the humble arrow, or ye, was used in patterns because it was believed to pierce and drive away demonic influences. Color, too, played a vital role. While adults had to navigate complex color hierarchies, children were often dressed in vibrant, eye-catching reds and oranges. These fiery hues were not just for cheerfulness. They were actively thought to repel evil spirits and diseases like smallpox, which were often personified as demons that would be frightened away by such a bold, powerful color. From the ornate silks of a samurai's son to the humble, charm-stitched cotton of a farmer's daughter, a child's clothing was a parent's most tangible expression of hope, a daily ritual of protection wrapping their most vulnerable charges in a cloak of symbolic armor. But beneath all these visible layers of silk and symbolism, the formal kimono, the 12-layer robe, the imposing armor, existed another, more intimate world of clothing, one that was never meant to be seen by the public eye, yet was absolutely fundamental to the entire structure of dress. This is the world of bathing attire and underwear, the unseen layers that made the elegant public presentation possible and reveal a great deal about daily life and practical hygiene in feudal Japan. The most essential of these hidden garments was the hadajuban. Think of this as the foundational layer, a thin, simple kimono worn directly against the skin, beneath the main outer robe. Its purpose was brilliantly practical. The beautiful, often expensive silks and fine linens of the outer kimono were delicate and difficult to clean. The hadajuban acted as a protective barrier, absorbing body oils and sweat, shielding the prized outer garment from soiling and wear. This meant that the outer kimono, which was complex to put on and arrange, did not need to be washed frequently. Instead, it was the simple, lightweight hadajuban that was laundered regularly. This system was a perfect example of the pragmatic ingenuity woven into every aspect of life. It preserved the beauty and longevity of the public-facing clothing while managing the realities of the human body. The hadajuban itself was typically made of plain white cotton or linen, a blank slate of pure functionality that existed in stark contrast to the vibrant, symbolic world it made possible. The concept of cleanliness extended beyond just undergarments and into the social ritual of bathing, which brings us to another iconic and surprisingly versatile garment, the yukata. In its earliest form, the yukata was precisely what its name suggests, yu meaning bath and katabira meaning underwear. It was a simple, unlined robe made of absorbent cotton, and its original function was to serve as a bathrobe. After soaking in a communal bathhouse, a person would dry off and slip into the yukata. The lightweight cotton would efficiently wick away any remaining moisture, allowing the wearer to comfortably travel home or relax in the evening without putting their formal day clothes back on over damp skin. Its design was straightforward, a single layer of fabric, often in a simple blue and white pattern, with a soft sash. It was easy to wear, easy to clean, and perfect for this transitional, private moment after the bath. But the story of the yukata doesn't end there. Over time, particularly during the peaceful and culturally vibrant Edo period, this humble bathrobe underwent a remarkable evolution. As cotton became more widely available and affordable, the yukata began to step out of the bathhouse and into the wider world. It transitioned from being purely functional underwear into the quintessential garment for casual summer wear. Its lightweight, breathable cotton made it perfectly suited for Japan's hot, humid summers. People began wearing it not just after a bath, but as comfortable loungewear at home, for relaxing in the evening, or for attending informal summer festivals and fireworks displays. Its status shifted so dramatically that it became a fashion item in its own right. While still simpler than a formal kimono, the yukata worn outdoors featured more deliberate and decorative patterns, stylish geometric designs, elegant stripes, or seasonal motifs like fireworks or goldfish. It was worn with a proper obi sash, though a softer and simpler one than used with formal wear, and completed with geta sandals. This transformation of the yukata from a simple bathrobe into acceptable, even fashionable, public attire is a fascinating example of how practical garments could cross social boundaries and evolve in their meaning. It represented a moment of relaxed informality in a society otherwise governed by strict sartorial rules, a comfortable and accessible piece of clothing that bridged the gap between the purely private and the acceptably public. While the samurai, merchants, and nobles all navigated a world defined by social hierarchy and sumptuary law, There existed a group whose clothing was designed to transcend worldly status altogether: the Buddhist monks. Their attire was a physical manifestation of their spiritual vows, a deliberate rejection of the material world and its vanity. The core of a monk's wardrobe was the kessa, a rectangular robe that is arguably one of the most significant garments in all of Buddhism. But this was not a robe in the conventional sense. It was originally a patchwork cloak, assembled from discarded pieces of cloth scavenged from rubbish heaps or funeral grounds. This humble origin was central to its meaning. By wearing a garment made from society's cast-offs, a monk symbolically shed his ego, his attachment to beauty, and his former social identity. The process of sewing these rags together into a whole was itself a form of meditation, representing the transformation of a fragmented self into an enlightened being. Over this kessa, which is draped over one shoulder like a sash, monks wear a simple, often black or gray robe called a koromo. The entire ensemble is devoid of ornamentation, typically in summer, earthy tones of black, white, gray, or brown, colors that reflect simplicity, impermanence, and non-attachment. Every aspect of this clothing serves a purpose. The loose fit allows for comfortable, prolonged meditation. The muted colors prevent distraction and help the wearer blend into the background, fostering a state of inner focus. For a Buddhist monk, his robe was not a uniform of status but a tool for spiritual practice, a constant, tactile reminder of his commitment to a path of humility and enlightenment. The sound of his simple, unadorned robes whispering as he moved was the sound of a life dedicated to looking inward, far from the rustling silks of the court or the imposing armor of the samurai. In stark contrast to the subdued aesthetic of Buddhism stands the vibrant and ceremonial world of Shinto, Japan's indigenous spiritual tradition. Where the Buddhist monk seeks to detach from the world, the Shinto priest's role is to act as a bridge between the human and the divine, the kami that inhabit nature and the cosmos. This fundamental difference in purpose is vividly expressed in their attire. A Shinto priest's garments during important rituals are a spectacle of formal, symbolic color and structure, designed to honor the kami and mark the occasion as one of profound significance. The most common formal outfit for a priest includes a pair of wide, pleated trousers known as hakama, identical in form to those worn by the samurai, but often in brilliant, auspicious colors like vivid green, deep purple, or a radiant orange-red. Over a white underrobe, symbolizing purity, the priest wears a stiff, sleeved outer jacket called a ho. This ho can be in a range of colors, with white representing the highest level of purity, while other hues like light blue or yellow may be used for different ranks or specific ceremonies. The entire ensemble is a symphony of sharp, angular folds and crisp lines, creating an imposing and dignified silhouette fit for communing with the gods. Completing this sacred uniform are two of the most distinctive items we've encountered before, now repurposed in a deeply spiritual context. On his feet, the priest wears esagutsu, which are lacquered wooden clogs painted black. These elevate him literally and symbolically above the impure earth as he performs his rites. On his head, he wears the formal eboshi cap, the same black lacquered paper headgear that signified rank for the court nobility and samurai. For the Shinto priest, the eboshi is not a marker of social class but a sacred item that designates his consecrated role as an intermediary. Its rigid, formal shape frames his face, directing attention upward and lending an air of solemn authority to his presence. When you see a Shinto priest in his full regalia, you are witnessing a living connection to the ancient rituals of Japan, a tradition where color, form, and ceremony combine to create a channel for divine power, a world away from the monk's quiet quest for personal awakening within his simple, dark robes. This striking divergence in religious attire reflects the core philosophical differences between these two coexisting faiths. Buddhism, with its focus on overcoming suffering through the renunciation of desire, finds its sartorial expression in the monk's humble robes. The lack of color, the rough fabric, the patchwork history of the kessa, all of it serves to minimize the self and its attachments. Shinto, on the other hand, is a life-affirming religion that celebrates the sacredness within the natural world and the cycles of life, death, and harvest. Its rituals are often joyous community events, festivals meant to thank the kami for their blessings and seek their continued favor. The priest's colorful and formal robes are a gift of beauty and respect offered to the deities. They are meant to be impressive, to visually delight the kami just as the rituals, music, and offerings are meant to please them. Therefore, the clothing of a Shinto priest is not an abandonment of the world's beauty, but a glorification of it in service to the divine. One tradition dresses to erase the individual. The other dresses to honor the community and the spirits that safeguard it. This fascinating parallel, where two spiritual paths develop such visually distinct yet equally meaningful languages of dress, shows once again that in feudal Japan, no piece of cloth was ever just a piece of cloth. It was a profound statement of belief, purpose, and one's place in the visible and invisible worlds. Even within the vibrant, floating world of the entertainment districts, where the merchant class indulged in fashion and art, the distinction between different types of women was articulated with breathtaking clarity through their attire. Two figures often confused in the modern imagination, the geisha and the high-ranking courtesan, used clothing as a public declaration of their vastly different roles, creating a visual language as nuanced as any spoken dialect. The geisha, whose name literally translates to art person, was first and foremost a performer, a master of music, dance, and witty conversation. Her entire aesthetic was therefore engineered to project an aura of attainable yet unapproachable refinement. Think of her style as the ultimate expression of the icky sensibility we discussed earlier, sophisticated, subtle, and suggesting a deep cultural wealth rather than overt sexuality. A geisha's kimono, while beautiful, was characterized by a deliberate and mature elegance. The colors were often more subdued, think deep burgundies, forest greens, or sophisticated grays, with patterns that were artistic and tasteful, perhaps a subtle scattering of autumn leaves or a delicate bamboo grove. Her obai, the wide sash that cinches the kimono, was tied in a neat, compact, and secure knot at the back. This practical style, known as the teiko musubai or drum knot, was essential for her work. It allowed for the freedom of movement required to play the shamisen, perform intricate dances, and move gracefully through a tea house without knocking over delicate tea sets with a trailing sash. Her entire ensemble was a masterpiece of controlled artistry. A uniform that declared her primary value was her cultivated skill, not her physical availability. The high-ranking courtesan, particularly the celebrated teiu or waran of the licensed pleasure quarters, existed in a completely different sartorial universe. Where the geisha's appeal was subtlety, the courtesan's was spectacular, theatrical confrontation. Her clothing was not designed for practical movement or artistic performance. It was a walking work of extravagant, prohibitive theater meant to stop you in your tracks and announce her exalted status and price from 100 paces away. Her kimono was lavishly decorated with bold, bright patterns, flamboyant peonies, golden phoenixes, and swirling clouds, often using techniques like Yuuzhan dyeing, which created breathtakingly detailed and vibrant pictorial scenes. The fabrics were the most opulent silks and brocades available, shimmering under the lantern light of the district, but the single most dramatic and defining feature of her attire was her obai. In a stunning reversal of all convention, the courtesan's enormous, stiff obai was not tied at the back, but was instead elaborately knit and draped in the front. This style is known as the darari obai, or dangling obai, and it could be so long that its ends would trail elegantly on the ground behind her as she walked. The reason for this front-tied obai is layered with meaning. On a purely practical level, it functioned as a clear, instant identifier of her profession, distinguishing her immediately from a geisha or a respectable townswoman. But on a symbolic level, it was a piece of wearable propaganda. This incredibly elaborate and restrictive style made even the simplest acts, like walking, into a highly stylized performance. The weight and placement of the obai forced a slow, swaying, pigeon-toed gait known as hari or achobo. a walk that required immense practice and physical strength to maintain. This wasn't a natural way to move, it was a deliberate, mesmerizing spectacle of difficulty and luxury. The sheer impracticality of her entire ensemble was its own message. It screamed that she was so valuable, so removed from the mundane world of chores and labor, that she required attendants just to help her dress and move. Every element of her appearance, from the towering Katsuyama hairstyle, adorned with countless hairpins, to the thumping of her high geta clogs on the wooden walkways, was a performance designed to create an aura of an unattainable goddess, a living work of art who could be appreciated only from a distance, or at a very high cost. The geisha invited you into a conversation. The courtesan presented herself as a masterpiece on display. Now, let's turn our attention to the single most transformative accessory in the entire wardrobe, the obai. If you think of the kimono as a beautiful but simple T-shaped canvas, then the obai is the masterful frame that completes the painting. It's the element that holds everything together, both literally and artistically. But this wasn't always the case. In its earliest forms, the obai was a purely functional, almost invisible component. Imagine a narrow, cord-like tie, perhaps made of simple braided cloth or even just a strip of fabric. Its sole job was pragmatic, to keep the kimono securely closed. It was tucked away, doing its duty without drawing any attention to itself. This humble beginning makes its later evolution all the more spectacular, a journey from a basic fastener to a breathtakingly wide, sculptural work of art that often became the most eye-catching part of the entire ensemble. The transition from slender cord to a dominant fashion statement was a slow revolution driven by changing tastes and social competition. During the Edo period, as the merchant class grew wealthier and sought new, subtle ways to express their prosperity within the confines of sumptuary laws, the obai presented a perfect opportunity. It was a part of the outfit where extravagance could be displayed more freely than on the kimono itself. Over decades, the obai gradually widened, transforming from a thin tie into a broad band that could be as wide as 12 inches or more. It also became stiffer, often reinforced with cardboard or other materials inserted inside, which allowed it to be tied into the large, elaborate knots we associate with the garment today. This stiffening was key. It turned the obai from a floppy sash into a structured sculptural element that held its shape, creating a dramatic silhouette from the back. The focus of the entire outfit began to shift. While the kimono's design often emphasized the front and the flowing sleeves, the obai moved the center of aesthetic gravity to the back, becoming a grand, wearable billboard for personal taste and artistic flair. Of course, the way this magnificent sash was tied spoke its own complex language. The knot itself was a powerful communicator, revealing a woman's age, marital status, and the formality of the occasion. For young, unmarried women, the derari obai, or dangling obai, was a popular and flirtatious style. As we saw with the courtesans, it was long and lavish, but for ordinary girls, it was tied in a way that suggested youthful vitality and availability. The most common and versatile knot for women of all classes, however, was the teiko musubai, or drum knot. Resembling a compact, rectangular box or a stylized drum, this knot was both elegant and incredibly practical. Its secure, flat profile meant it didn't get in the way of daily tasks, which is why it was adopted by geisha for their performances and by respectable townswomen for their daily lives. For married women, a simpler, flatter knot was often the norm, signaling a move from the flamboyance of youth to a more settled and mature identity. There were dozens of other styles, each with its own name and cultural resonance, from the delicate butterfly like chacho musubai to the more formal bunko musubai. Learning to tie these knots was an essential skill, often requiring the help of another person, and the chosen style was a silent but unmistakable signal to the world. Beyond the knot, the obai was a showcase for some of the most luxurious materials and exquisite craftsmanship in the feudal world. While a commoner's obai might be made of sturdy cotton or hemp, the elite demanded opulence. The most prestigious abas were woven from the finest silks, often using complex techniques that resulted in breathtaking brocades. A nishiki obai, for example, was a dazzling tapestry-woven silk, heavy with threads of gold and silver, creating scenes of such richness they could be considered independent works of art. Another technique, used in dyeing, allowed for the creation of intricate, painterly designs on the silk landscapes, floral arrangements, or scenes from classical literature, that turned the obi into a wearable gallery. The sheer weight and cost of these materials were part of their appeal. A formal brocade obi was a significant financial investment, a tangible asset that could be passed down through generations. For the wealthy merchant's wife, who was legally barred from wearing certain silks on her kimono, her obi could be her secret, or not-so-secret declaration of her family's true economic standing, a bold stripe of defiant luxury wrapped tightly around her waist. Ultimately, the obi's journey from function to art perfectly encapsulates a central theme of feudal Japanese dress: the transformation of necessity into profound cultural expression. What began as a simple piece of string evolved into the focal point of an outfit, a canvas that held its own in a symphony of fabric, color, and knot. It balanced an incredible duality. It was both the anchor that physically held the voluminous kimono in place, and the most liberated element for personal and artistic statement. In the subtle language of dress, the obi became the exclamation point, a bold, confident declaration of taste, status, and identity that completed the elegant silhouette and told a story all its own. When the brilliant colors of autumn faded and the bitter chill of winter settled over the islands, the people of feudal Japan faced the season with the same ingenious adaptability they applied to every other aspect of life. Staying warm wasn't just a matter of comfort, it was a matter of survival, and their solutions blended practical necessity with a distinct sense of style. While the basic structure of the kimono remained, the approach to winter wear involved a strategic focus on insulation, introducing specialized garments that transformed the lightweight robe into a fortress against the cold. The most iconic of these was undoubtedly the tanzan, also known in some regions as the dotra. This was essentially a winter kimono for men, but one that was radically different in construction. Imagine taking the standard T-shaped robe and filling it with a thick layer of padding, creating a garment that was wonderfully bulky and warm. The tanzan was generously quilted with soft, resilient materials like raw silk floss or cotton wadding, which trapped body heat effectively without being crushingly heavy. It was typically cut a bit shorter than a formal kimono, ending around the mid-calf, which made it easier to move around in without the hem dragging through snow or slush. The collar was also often padded and could be turned up against the wind, functioning like a built-in scarf. For a samurai at home in his residence or a wealthy merchant relaxing in his shop, the tanzan was the ultimate in comfortable, dignified loungewear, a cozy cocoon that allowed him to endure the long winter months in relative warmth. For women, and often for men as well, a different strategy prevailed: the strategic layering of coats over the standard kimono. The most common of these was the kaidori, a versatile and practical sleeveless coat. Think of the kaidori as a historical equivalent to a modern gilet or sleeveless jacket. Its sleeveless design was a stroke of genius, as it provided crucial core warmth without restricting the movement of the arms or adding excessive bulk to the shoulders, which was especially important for women who needed to use their hands for household tasks. The kaidori was worn draped over the kimono and secured with a simple tie at the front. It was often lined or padded itself, providing an extra barrier against the wind. The beauty of this system was its modularity. On a moderately cold day, a woman might wear just her kimono with a few additional underlayers, but when the temperature plummeted, she could simply add the kaidori over everything, instantly boosting her insulation without having to completely change her entire outfit. This garment was ubiquitous across classes, though the materials varied dramatically. A farmer's wife might have a kaidori of thick, quilted cotton, while a lady of the court could possess one made of exquisite brocade silk, lined with the finest raw silk padding, turning a practical item into a luxurious statement. Beyond these specialized outer garments, the real secret to winter warmth lay in the art of strategic layering beneath the main kimono. The simple hatajuban, the thin under kimono worn year-round, was just the first line of defense. When winter arrived, people would add multiple additional layers of under kimonos, known collectively as nagejuban. These were essentially full-length robes, similar in cut to the outer kimono but made of warmer materials and often in subdued colors since they were not meant to be seen. A person might wear 2, 3, or even 4 of these nagejuban under their primary kimono, creating a sandwich of insulating air between each layer of fabric. This method was far more effective than wearing one single thick garment, as the trapped air acted as a superb insulator. The choice of fabric for these underlayers was critical. While cotton was common, those who could afford it sought out materials with superior thermal properties. One of the most prized was silk, specifically a type of thick, woven silk known as shinji. Silk has a remarkable natural ability to retain heat without feeling heavy or damp, making it the ideal fiber for winter undergarments. Wearing multiple layers of silk nagejuban underneath a padded tanzan or a kaidori was the Feudal Japanese equivalent of modern high-performance thermal layering, a system that provided exceptional warmth through intelligent material science and design. For the elite, this pursuit of warmth could reach truly opulent levels with the incorporation of rare and expensive linings, while the common populace made do with plant-based fibers and cotton wadding. The nobility and supremely wealthy merchants had access to a more potent insulator: fur. Pelts from animals like fox, rabbit, and even bear were sometimes used to line the hems of expensive winter kimonos or the interiors of kaidori coats. This wasn't just about brute warmth, it was a breathtaking display of wealth and access to rare commodities. The feel of soft, luxurious fur against the skin was the ultimate sensory experience of winter luxury. Later in the feudal period, as trade expanded, another material began to make an appearance: wool. While not native to Japan, wool was occasionally imported and was highly valued for its unique properties. It was particularly effective at retaining heat even when wet, making it a sought-after, if exotic, material for those who could obtain it. The integration of these materials shows a society that, while bound by tradition, was also pragmatic and eager to adopt new solutions for age-old problems like the cold. From the humble, densely quilted tanzan of the townsman to the silk and fur-layered ensemble of the aristocrat, winter wear in feudal Japan was a masterclass in adaptation, proving that even in the face of nature's harshest season, style and survival could be elegantly and warmly intertwined. But of course, staying warm inside your home was one challenge. Venturing out into the relentless rain and snow of a Japanese winter, or embarking on a long journey on foot, presented a completely different set of obstacles. For these situations, the people of feudal Japan developed some of their most ingenious and purely practical garments, items born from an intimate understanding of their environment and the materials it provided. When the skies opened up, the most common sight across all levels of society was the mino, a truly remarkable piece of rainwear. Imagine a long, shapeless cloak, almost like a conical tent made not of cloth, but of woven natural fibers. The mino was crafted from rice straw, sedge grass, or sometimes even from the bark of certain trees. A farmer would wear one in the field, a traveler would have one rolled up on his back, and even a samurai on a journey might don one over his armor to keep the elements at bay. The construction was a masterpiece of peasant ingenuity. Long strands of straw were carefully woven into a dense, thatch-like fabric. This created a garment that was naturally waterproof. Rainwater would simply bead up and roll off the waxy, layered straw, much like it does on a well-thatched roof. The mino was typically sleeveless, hanging from the shoulders and flaring out toward the bottom, providing comprehensive coverage for the wearer and the precious kimono underneath. It was secured with simple straw cords. While it was undeniably bulky and could be quite heavy when wet, its effectiveness was undeniable. For the common person, it was a disposable, recyclable gift from the rice paddies themselves when it eventually wore out. It could be composted or used as kindling. For the elite, more refined versions existed, woven from softer, finer grasses, but the principle remained the same: a breathable, sustainable, and highly effective barrier against the rain that leveraged the most humble of materials into a tool of survival. For those who could afford a slightly less cumbersome solution, there was the kappa. Now, it's crucial not to confuse this with the mythical water-dwelling creature of the same name. This kappa was a raincoat made from a surprisingly delicate material, oiled paper. The process involved treating sturdy Japanese paper, known as washi, with natural oils, typically from the perilla plant or from tung nuts. This treatment transformed the porous paper into a flexible, water-resistant sheet. These oiled sheets were then cut and sewn into the shape of a loose coat, complete with wide sleeves and a hood. The kappa was much lighter than the straw mino and offered better mobility, making it a popular choice for townspeople who needed to move through city streets during a downpour. However, it had its own set of vulnerabilities. It wasn't as durable as the straw mino and could tear if snagged on something. It also had a distinct, pungent smell from the oils used in its treatment. But for a merchant needing to visit a client across town or a government official making his rounds, the kappa represented a perfect balance of practicality and relative sophistication, a testament to the era's skill in manipulating everyday materials for specialized purposes. Whether facing a sudden storm or planning a pilgrimage that would take weeks, the feudal traveler's most constant companion was not a person, but a piece of equipment, the furoshiki. This was not a bag in the modern sense, but a versatile square of cloth, often made of durable cotton or silk, that was the ultimate all-in-one travel solution. The beauty of the furoshiki lay in its simplicity and adaptability. A traveler would place their bundle of belongings in the center of the cloth. This could include a spare set of clothing, a hadajuban, a small boxed lunch, writing implements, and of course, their rolled-up mino or kappa for emergencies. Then, using a variety of traditional knots, they would skillfully tie the opposing corners of the cloth together, creating a secure, comfortable bundle that could be slung over the shoulder or carried on the back. This method distributed the weight evenly and kept the hands free, which was essential for navigating rough terrain or using a walking stick. The contents of that bundle tell a vivid story of life on the road. Alongside the spare clothing and rain gear, a discerning traveler would also carry a kasa, one of those iconic conical hats, for protection from both sun and rain. They might have a pair of spare war-edgy sandals tied to the outside, as the straw soles wore out quickly on long journeys. For a samurai, the bundle might also contain a small pouch with money, official papers, and a compact writing set for sending messages. The entire system was one of elegant self-sufficiency. There were no luggage carts or porters for the average person. Everything you needed for a journey that could last from a few days to several months had to be carried on your own back. The furoshiki bundle was a person's mobile life, a compact parcel containing all their worldly needs, wrapped in a simple cloth and secured with a knot that held not just their possessions, but their hopes of reaching the next post town before nightfall. This image of the lone traveler, a straw kasa on their head and a cloth-wrapped bundle on their back, is one of the most enduring and evocative symbols of mobility in a world where every journey was a personal and physical test. Throughout the year, the rigid codes of daily dress were temporarily set aside, replaced by a collective explosion of color, pattern, and symbolic joy during Japan's many festivals and celebrations. These special occasions provided a sanctioned release from the strict social hierarchy, a time when the entire community, from the wealthiest merchant to the humblest farmer, could participate in a shared visual spectacle. For a brief, brilliant moment, the streets became a living tapestry of auspicious wishes and communal happiness, with clothing acting as the primary medium for expressing hope, gratitude, and a connection to the divine. The most significant of these annual events was the New Year, a time of renewal and fresh beginnings. For this celebration, it was considered essential to wear a brand new kimono, a practice that symbolized shedding the impurities and weariness of the old year and stepping into the new one with purity and optimism. This wasn't just about looking one's best, it was a ritual act. The most common and powerful motif for a New Year's kimono was the combination of pine, bamboo, and plum blossoms, known as shachikyubai. This trio was deeply auspicious. The pine tree represented longevity and steadfastness. The bamboo symbolized resilience and integrity, as it bends but does not break, and the plum blossom stood for perseverance and hope, as it is the first flower to bravely bloom while winter snow may still be on the ground. Wearing these symbols was like wrapping oneself in a prayer for a long, strong, and prosperous year ahead. Cranes and tortoises, legendary creatures believed to live for 1,000 years, were also incredibly popular, their images embroidered or dyed onto the fabric as a direct invocation for a long and healthy life. The colors for these New Year kimonos were intentionally vibrant and celebratory. Women and girls often wore stunning combinations of red and white or black and gold, colors associated with happiness, purity, and wealth. To appear in public in worn-out or drab clothing during the New Year was seen as inauspicious, almost an invitation for bad luck. So even the poorest families would strive to have at least one family member, often a child, adorned in a new, symbolically charged robe for the important first visit to the shrine. Summer brought its own unique and poignant celebrations, chief among them the Aben festival, a time for honoring the spirits of one's ancestors. The mood of Aben was a beautiful blend of solemn remembrance and joyful community gathering, and this duality was reflected in the clothing. During the day, people would visit family graves and make offerings at household altars, often wearing more subdued, respectful kimonos. But as evening fell, the atmosphere would shift to one of festive celebration, culminating in the traditional Bon Odori dances. For these dances, participants would wear a specific type of summer kimono known as a yukata. Lightweight, comfortable, and made of breathable cotton, the yukata was the perfect garment for a hot summer night. While during the rest of the year the yukata was simple indoor wear, during Aben, it was proudly worn outdoors as festive attire. The patterns for these festival yukata were distinctly summery and playful. You would see designs of goldfish swimming in bowls, delicate morning glories, colorful fireworks bursting against a dark blue sky, or flowing streams and rivers, which were also symbolic of the spiritual flow connecting the living and the dead. The communal nature of the Bon Odori, where everyone dances in a circle, was visually reinforced by the sea of nearly identical yukata often provided by the local community or temple, creating a powerful sense of unity and shared identity under the summer stars. However, for sheer scale, theatricality, and outright audacity of costume, no events could surpass the great city festivals, the Matsuri, and the undisputed king of them all was Kyoto's Jinmatsuri. Originating in the 9th century as a ritual to appease the gods during a plague, the Jinmatsuri evolved over centuries into a month-long spectacle that was as much a fierce competition between wealthy merchant districts as it was a religious observance. The pinnacle of the festival is the grand procession of floats, known as Yamaboko Junko, and it is here that the concept of festival dress reaches its most spectacular and layered form. The men who pull the massive, lavishly decorated floats through the narrow streets wear a uniform of sorts happy coats, which are short, straight-lined jackets, often made of indigo-dyed cotton and boldly emblazoned with the distinctive crest of their neighborhood association. These happy coats transformed individual pullers into a cohesive unit, a visual representation of their local pride and collective strength. But the true stars of the Jinmatsuri, the ones who wore the most outrageous and historically significant costumes, were the children. On the day before the float procession, a special parade known as the Mikoshi Tajio takes place, featuring the Chigo, or sacred child. This child, selected from a prominent merchant family, is dressed in the breathtakingly elaborate costume of a Heian period court noble, a direct and intentional anachronism. The young boy is adorned in layers of brilliant silk brocade, his face painted white, and he wears the iconic black eboshi cap of the ancient aristocracy. His costume is so opulent and historically precise that it turns him into a living museum piece, a direct bridge to a bygone era of imperial splendor. This was the merchant class's most brilliant and legally unassailable act of sartorial rebellion. They were forbidden by sumptuary laws from wearing such finery themselves, but there was no law against dressing their children as imperial nobility for a sacred religious purpose. It was a genius loophole, allowing them to publicly showcase their immense wealth and cultural sophistication while technically adhering to the letter of the law. The sight of this child, a symbol of the merchant class, being carried through the streets in the raiment of the ancient aristocracy, was a powerful, silent, and stunningly beautiful declaration of their rising status in the feudal world. Yet for all the intricate silks and imposing armor we've explored, the vast majority of any feudal Japanese army was not composed of these elite warriors. The true backbone of the great samurai legions, the crushing weight that decided the outcome of epic battles, was a far more humble figure, the ashigaru, the common foot soldier. Where the samurai was an individual of honor and lineage, the ashigaru was a cog in a military machine, and his attire reflected this starkly practical reality. His uniform was not a declaration of personal glory, but a testament to mass production, cost-effectiveness, and the brutal demands of warfare for the common man. To understand the ashigaru is to see the other side of the samurai myth, a world where survival, not honor, was the primary concern, and every piece of equipment was designed with that single, sobering fact in mind. The most fundamental element of the ashigaru's identity was that his gear was almost always standard issue, provided by the daimyo, the feudal lord he served. He did not commission a master armorer to craft a suit that expressed his family's history. He was handed equipment from a centralized storehouse, designed to outfit hundreds or even thousands of men in a uniform and efficient manner. This practice served two crucial purposes for the lord. First, it was immensely cost-effective, allowing for the rapid equipping of a large fighting force without the exorbitant expense of custom-made samurai armor. Second, and just as importantly, it created a cohesive visual identity on the battlefield. An army of ashigaru all wearing the same colors and bearing the same prominent mon, or family crest, of their daimyo was a terrifying and impressive spectacle of organized power. It transformed a rabble of farmers and townsmen into a unified military unit, a walking advertisement of their lord's wealth and authority. This standardization meant that from a distance, it was often impossible to distinguish one ashigaru from another. They were a collective force, a sea of identical helmets and banners moving in disciplined ranks. The centerpiece of this standardized kit was the jingasa, the quintessential ashigaru helmet. Forget the fearsome, crested kabuto of the samurai. The jingasa was a study in pure, unadorned function. Its name literally means camp hat, and its design was brilliantly simple. A wide, shallow bowl, typically made from a single piece of iron or from layers of hardened leather that were lacquered to make them weatherproof. Its shape was its genius. The wide, sloping brim was incredibly effective at deflecting arrows, stones, and falling debris during a siege, but the jingasa's utility extended far beyond combat. A soldier could use it as a stool to sit on during a march, as a makeshift bucket to carry water or rice, or even as a small shield to dig a shallow trench. It was the multi-tool of the feudal battlefield, a single, versatile object that served a dozen different purposes in the harsh life of a foot soldier. Often, the front of the jingasa would be boldly painted with the daimyo's mon, making the wearer's allegiance unmistakable even in the thickest dust and chaos of the fight. For body protection, the ashigaru wore a simplified, lightweight version of samurai armor known as the daomaru. Where a high-ranking samurai's omakron yoroi was a complex, boxy suit designed for mounted archery, the daomaru was a more streamlined cuirass meant for a foot soldier who needed to move quickly and wield a long spear or, later, a matchlock rifle. The do, or chest plate, was typically constructed from iron or leather plates laced together, but in a much more straightforward and less decorative pattern than a samurai's armor. It provided essential protection for the torso and back while leaving the arms and legs relatively unencumbered for marching and fighting. This was not armor meant to stop a direct blow from a samurai's katana. It was designed to deflect arrows from a distance and to offer some protection in the frantic, close-quarters melee of a spear fight. Underneath this armor, the ashigaru wore the simplest of clothing, a short kassoed robe, often made of sturdy, plain cotton or hemp, and hakama trousers that were tied tightly to keep them from getting tangled. His entire ensemble was a study in minimizing fuss and maximizing freedom of movement, a uniform for a man whose job was one of relentless physical exertion. This stark difference in attire between the ashigaru and the samurai was a constant, visible reminder of the unbridgeable class divide within the army itself. The samurai was a professional warrior, a member of the elite ruling class whose entire identity was tied to martial prowess. The ashigaru, by contrast, was often a conscripted peasant or a low-born volunteer, a temporary soldier whose primary identity was rooted in the soil, not the sword. His simple, mass-produced armor and plain clothing were a direct reflection of his disposable status in the eyes of his superiors. He was a resource to be managed, not a retainer to be honored. And yet, it was these common foot soldiers, with their simple jingasa helmets and standardized spears, who formed the unbreakable phalanxes that samurai commanders relied upon to win their wars. Their story is a powerful reminder that history is not only written by the elite in their gleaming armor, but also by the countless faceless thousands whose practical, unglamorous gear made the ambitions of lords and shoguns a reality. And yet, for all the rigid rules governing the attire of samurai, farmers, and merchants, there was one figure in feudal Japan whose entire existence depended on breaking every single one of them: the ninja. The popular image is unmistakable, a shadowy figure clad head to toe in a form-fitting black jumpsuit, only their eyes visible, scaling a castle wall under the cover of night. It's a dramatic and iconic look, immortalized in countless films and comics. But here's the astonishing truth that shatters the myth: historical ninja, the real shinobi who worked as spies, saboteurs, and assassins, almost certainly never wore such a costume. In fact, to wear an all-black uniform would have been the single worst thing they could do for their mission. Their clothing wasn't about creating a terrifying silhouette. It was about achieving the ultimate goal of any spy: perfect invisibility. Think about the logic of it for a moment. A ninja's primary task was infiltration, sneaking into enemy castles, blending into crowds to gather intelligence, or moving unseen through the countryside. If you were a guard on a castle wall at night, what would be easier to spot? A solid, dark shape moving against a varied background of gray stone and deep shadows, or someone dressed in colors and textures that match their surroundings? A solid black shape actually stands out against the complex tapestry of the night, creating a stark, moving cutout. The all-black shinobi shazoku, or ninja suit, is a theatrical invention from kabuki theater. Stagehands, known as kuroko, would dress in head-to-toe black to signify to the audience that they were invisible, meant to be overlooked as they moved props. Playwrights and performers later adopted this visual shorthand for the ninja characters in their stories, and the legend stuck. For a real shinobi, such an outfit would be a death sentence. Their fashion was not for the stage, it was for survival, and it was dictated by one ruthless principle: look like everyone else. So, what did they actually wear? The answer is brilliantly simple and pragmatic. A ninja's clothing was a masterclass in mimicry. Their most common disguise was that of a completely ordinary, unremarkable person. To infiltrate a town, they would dress as a traveling merchant, wearing the same dark blue or brown kassoed and hakama trousers common to the merchant class. To case a rural fortress, they might adopt the guise of a wandering Buddhist monk, in a simple gray or black robe, or even a straw-hatted farmer, in a humble happy coat and mamo-hiki pants stained with dirt. The goal was to wear the unofficial uniform of the locale they were infiltrating, allowing them to pass without a second glance. They studied local dialects, manners, and customs to complete the illusion. A ninja wasn't a superhuman figure in a specialized suit. He was the man you didn't notice selling you rice, the pilgrim you ignored praying at a temple, the farmer you saw working in a distant field. His greatest weapon was his utter ordinariness. However, within this framework of perfect camouflage, they did make subtle, ingenious modifications to their everyday garments to enhance their effectiveness. While the base clothing was standard issue for the class they were impersonating, it was often adapted for the unique physical demands of espionage. The fabric, for instance, was carefully chosen. While a common farmer's robe was made of rough, noisy hemp, a ninja might have his version made from a softer, tightly woven cotton or linen that wouldn't rustle loudly with every movement. The cut of the garments was also crucial. Sleeves might be slightly tapered or secured with hidden ties to prevent them from flapping or catching on obstacles during a climb or a frantic escape. The most important modification was to the trousers. Their hakama or mamohiki were often cut with a deeper, more generous gusset, essentially a diamond-shaped piece of fabric sewn into the crotch seam. This single, brilliant alteration granted them an incredible range of motion, allowing for deep lunges, high kicks, and the ability to sprint and climb without any restriction from their clothing. It was a hidden functional upgrade on a completely normal-looking garment. And then there was the issue of equipment. A ninja had to carry a bewildering array of tools: grappling hooks, climbing ropes, caltrops, poisoned darts, lock picks, and more. They couldn't walk around with a bulky backpack. Everything had to be concealed on their person. Their modified clothing was a wearable toolkit. The obi sash was often wider and sturdier than normal, with hidden inner pockets or loops sewn in to hold small blades or lock picks. Specialized items like the shinobi shazoku, when it was used, wasn't a sleek jumpsuit but rather a practical set of separate pieces, a jacket and trousers that featured numerous discrete pockets and ties. A kaioketsu shoge, a hooked rope dart weapon, could be coiled and tucked into the small of the back. Metsubushi, containers for blinding powder, could be hidden in a sleeve. Even their footwear was adapted. While they might wear standard waraji sandals for a disguise, for night operations they had tabi socks with soft, divided toe soles made of supple deerskin or padded cloth, allowing them to move with near-silent steps and to gain better purchase when climbing walls. Every element of their attire, from the color of the cloth to the stitch of a hidden pocket, was a deliberate and calculated choice in the high-stakes game of not being seen. Their fashion was their function, a testament to the idea that true stealth isn't about becoming a shadow, but about seamlessly becoming part of the light. But all of these stunning garments, from the emperor's saffron robes to the farmer's humble hemp tunic, began their life not in a tailor's shop, but in the fields and forests. To truly appreciate the fabric of feudal Japanese society, we have to understand the fabric itself, the astonishing, labor-intensive journey from a humble silkworm's cocoon to the shimmering cloth on a noblewoman's back. This was a world dominated by three primary fibers, each with its own epic story: the luxurious silk, the rugged hemp, and the later arrival, the versatile cotton. The production of these textiles wasn't just a craft. It was a complex, year-long dance with nature, demanding incredible skill and patience at every single step. The most prized and prestigious of these was, without question, silk. The process of sericulture, of raising silkworms to produce raw silk, was an art form in itself, one shrouded in ritual and immense care. It all began with the tiny eggs of the Bomix mori moth, which were carefully stored through the winter. Come spring, these eggs would hatch into countless, voracious black caterpillars. For the next month, the sericulture farmers, who were often women, would embark on a relentless cycle of feeding. Their sole charge was to provide these caterpillars with a constant, pristine supply of fresh mulberry leaves, day and night. The environment had to be meticulously controlled. Too much noise, a sudden draft, or even a strong odor could shock the delicate creatures and ruin the entire harvest. As the silkworms grew, they would shed their skin several times before they were ready to spin their cocoons, a process that required them to be moved to special frames filled with twigs or straw. It was here that the magic happened. Each silkworm, using spinnerets on its head, would secrete a continuous liquid protein filament that hardened upon contact with the air, wrapping itself in a single, unbroken strand that could be an astonishing 900 meters long. To produce just 1 pound of raw silk required the cocoons of roughly 2,500 silkworms, but the work was far from over. To harvest this thread, the cocoons had to be processed before the adult moth could emerge and break the precious filament. The cocoons were first steamed or boiled, which had the dual purpose of killing the pupa inside and loosening the sticky protein, called sericin, that held the cocoon together. Then, in a delicate operation known as reeling, the fine filaments from several cocoons, typically between 5 and 8, were carefully gathered and twisted together to form a single, strong thread of raw silk. This thread was then wound onto large reels, ready to be woven. The entire endeavor was a high-stakes gamble with nature, a race against time that demanded ceaseless attention. A single misstep could mean the loss of a family's entire income for the year, making that final, gleaming skein of silk thread a testament to human perseverance as much as to the silkworm's incredible biological gift. In stark contrast to the delicate, indoor world of sericulture stood the cultivation of hemp and, later, cotton, the fibers of the common people. Hemp was the ancient, rugged workhorse of feudal Japan. The plant itself, a type of cannabis sativa cultivated for its strong bast fibers, was remarkably tough and could be grown in relatively poor soil. The process of turning the tall, fibrous stalks into wearable cloth was physically demanding. Once harvested, the stalks were soaked in water for weeks in a process called retting. This allowed bacteria to break down the natural gums, separating the desirable long fibers from the woody core. After retting, the damp stalks were beaten and scraped to remove this core. Then the fibers were combed out and spun into a coarse, durable yarn. The resulting cloth was incredibly strong, ideal for the hard-wearing clothing of farmers, fishermen, and laborers, but it was also stiff and rough against the skin. It was the fabric of necessity, born from the soil and the sheer physical strength of those who worked it. The arrival of cotton in the 15th century, introduced through trade with Korea and China, was nothing short of a quiet revolution for the common people. While initially a luxury, cotton cultivation quickly spread, particularly on the warmer southern islands. Compared to hemp, cotton was a game-changer. The process of transforming the fluffy balls into cloth was still laborious, involving ginning to remove seeds, carding to align the fibers, and spinning it into thread. But the resulting fabric was softer, more absorbent, and far more comfortable to wear. It was also easier to dye, leading to the proliferation of the iconic indigo blues that became synonymous with the Japanese peasantry. Cotton's breathability made it perfect for the humid summers, and its ability to hold warmth when layered made it a superior material for winter undergarments. The adoption of cotton didn't just offer comfort, it subtly shifted the aesthetic of the common classes, allowing for more varied and visually appealing everyday wear, even within the strict confines of sumptuary law. Once these precious threads, whether silk, hemp, or cotton, were spun, the final transformation occurred at the loom. Weaving was a specialized skill, often a distinct profession from farming or sericulture, and the technology evolved significantly over the feudal period. The most common loom for everyday textiles was the tabai hata, a simple backstrap loom. As the name implies, one end of the loom was tied to a fixed post or tree, while the other was attached to the weaver by a strap around their hips. By leaning back and forth, the weaver could control the tension on the warp threads, passing the shuttle carrying the weft thread through the shed they created. It was a portable, accessible technology, but it was slow and could only produce narrow widths of cloth. For the luxurious, complex patterned silks demanded by the elite, a much more sophisticated device was required, the jabata, or treadle loom. This larger, floor-based loom used foot pedals to control the sequence of raised warp threads, freeing the weaver's hands to manage the shuttle with greater speed and precision. It was on these looms that master weavers created the breathtaking brocades, damasks, and intricate nishiki silks, their feet dancing on the pedals to bring to life patterns of cranes, clouds, and seasonal flowers that were literally woven into the very structure of the cloth. This entire ecosystem of textile production, from the mulberry farmer to the master weaver, was not a free market. By the Edo period, it had become tightly controlled by powerful, government-sanctioned monopolies known as guilds, or za. These guilds were associations of artisans or merchants who held exclusive rights to produce and sell specific goods within a domain. A silk weaver's guild, for instance, would control the distribution of raw silk thread, set prices, and maintain strict quality standards. Membership was often hereditary, and the techniques were closely guarded secrets passed from master to apprentice. For the ruling samurai class, the guild system was a convenient way to regulate the economy, ensure a steady supply of luxury goods, and tax production efficiently. For the artisans within a guild, it provided protection from outside competition and a guaranteed market for their wares. However, it also stifled innovation and kept the barriers to entry impossibly high. The stunning kimono worn by a daimyo's wife was therefore more than a beautiful object. It was the end product of a vast, interlocked chain of specialized labor, a tangible representation of an entire economic system where the flow of thread from worm to loom was as carefully governed as the social classes who would eventually wear it. But beyond the flowing silks and structured armor, the very canvas of the body itself was meticulously prepared and painted as part of the daily ritual of dress. The pursuit of beauty in feudal Japan went far deeper than the clothes one wore. It was etched onto the skin, the face, and even the teeth, creating a standard of elegance that can seem startlingly foreign to us today. To truly be considered dressed, a person, particularly a woman of status, had to complete an elaborate process of personal grooming that transformed her natural features into a living work of art, conforming to an aesthetic that prized artifice and symbolism over natural appearance. This wasn't vanity in a simple sense. It was a crucial component of social presentation, a visible commitment to the cultural ideals of refinement and status. Perhaps the most striking of these practices was ohaguro, the custom of teeth blackening. From the Heian period onward, this was a definitive marker of a mature, married woman, especially among the aristocracy and the samurai class. The process was intricate and required regular maintenance. A special solution was made by soaking iron filings in tea or vinegar, which produced a ferric acetate liquid. This dark liquid was then mixed with other ingredients, such as gallnut powder, to create a dye that was carefully applied to the teeth. The result was a glossy, lacquer-like black finish. To modern sensibilities, this may seem bizarre, but within the context of feudal Japanese beauty, it was profoundly elegant. The pitch-black teeth created a stunning visual contrast against the stark white makeup worn on the face, framing the lips and mouth in a way that was considered highly alluring. More importantly, it was a powerful social signal. For an aristocratic lady, blackened teeth announced her transition into adulthood and marriage, signaling that she was no longer a available young girl, but a respected, established woman. It was a declaration of her elevated social standing, as the practice was largely confined to the elite. A court lady with a pale, white-powdered face, tiny painted crimson lips, and a demure smile that revealed glistening black teeth was the absolute pinnacle of sophisticated beauty. The transformation of the face did not stop at the mouth. Another universal practice among noblewomen and wealthy townswomen was the complete removal of their natural eyebrows. In a painstaking process, the original eyebrows were plucked or shaved away, creating a completely blank, smooth canvas on the brow. Then, using a sumi ink stick, new eyebrows were painted on, but not in their original location. These new brows were applied much higher up on the forehead, often just below the hairline. The style of these painted brows, known as hikimeu, changed over the centuries. During the Heian period, the favored shape was a soft, rounded dot or a short, thick dash. Later, in the Edo period, the style evolved into longer, more curved and graceful arcs that resembled the wings of a distant bird. This dramatic alteration of the facial landscape served multiple purposes. Like ohaguro, it clearly distinguished the mature, married woman from the unadorned young girl. It also created a serene, mask-like quality to the face, which was highly prized as an expression of composed elegance and emotional restraint. The high placement of the brows was believed to elongate the face and give it a more dignified, oval shape, conforming to the era's ideal of feminine beauty. This practice, combined with the blackened teeth, fundamentally redefined the wearer's features, presenting a face that was not merely enhanced, but completely reconstructed according to the rigid rules of high fashion. The foundation for this painted canvas was the pursuit of an impossibly pale complexion, achieved through the application of thick white makeup known as osharoi. A light skin tone had been a paramount beauty standard in Japan for centuries, symbolizing a life of privilege and leisure, utterly removed from any form of outdoor labor that would darken the skin from sun exposure. This white face was the ultimate status symbol. The primary ingredient for this makeup was rice powder. Finely milled rice would be mixed with water into a paste and then applied generously to the entire face, neck, and chest. For a more flawless and durable finish, some women used a lead-based powder, unaware of its terrible toxicity which could lead to lead poisoning, skin deterioration, and premature death. The application was a skillful art. The neck would often be painted in a deliberate pattern called sanbin sugi, which resembled 3 white stripes descending down the nape, a feature considered incredibly erotic and beautiful as it peeked from the collar of a kimono. Against this flat, porcelain white background, the features took on a dramatic, stylized intensity. The painted high eyebrows stood out starkly, and the lips were redrawn as a small, crimson blossom, using a paste made from safflower petals. This tiny, concentrated mouth, known as kuchaibni, was meant to resemble a budding flower and was the final touch in a look that was less about imitating nature and more about creating a living doll, an idealized representation of feminine beauty that was distant, refined, and utterly artificial. This entire process, the shaved brows, the blackened teeth, the white powdered skin, was a daily commitment to an aesthetic that saw the human body not as something to be accepted, but as a medium to be sculpted, painted, and perfected in the name of culture and class. So after this incredible journey, we've pulled back the curtain on a world where every thread was a word and every outfit a complete sentence in a complex, unspoken language. From the breathtaking weight of a court lady's 12-layer robe to the silent, practical defiance of a merchant's hidden silk lining, we've seen that clothing was never just about covering the body. It was a declaration, it was a law, it was a map of the entire social universe, instantly telling you who a person was, what they did, and the precise space they were allowed to occupy. A samurai's armor wasn't just protection, it was a psychological weapon and a mobile heraldic banner. A farmer's humble hemp tunic wasn't just durable cloth, it was a testament to a life of connection to the earth. The way a kimono was wrapped, the number of family crests displayed, the secret colors peeking from a sleeve, all of it was a meticulously coded performance, a daily ritual that reinforced the very foundations of the society. Unraveling these historical fashion mysteries does more than just satisfy our curiosity about what people wore. It hands us a unique key to understanding their entire world, their fears, their aspirations, their beliefs, and the rigid structures that held their lives together. The stark contrast between the ninja's brilliant ordinariness and the courtesan's theatrical extravagance shows us 2 completely different strategies for survival and influence in that world. The painful beauty standards of blackened teeth and shaved eyebrows reveal a culture that saw the human body as a canvas to be perfected according to its own ideals. When we look at a painting or a film set in feudal Japan now, we can see so much more than just beautiful costumes. We can read the silent stories woven into the fabric. We can understand the tension in a room where a wealthy merchant, legally barred from silk, wears a cotton robe of such subtle elegance that it shouts his true status to those who know how to look. We can feel the physical burden and the profound privilege inherent in the immobilized aristocracy, and we can appreciate the sheer ingenuity in the straw raincoat of a common traveler. This exploration reminds us that fashion is one of our most profound and personal cultural artifacts. It is a language that transcends time, and by learning to speak it, even across centuries, we connect more deeply with the people who came before us. Their choices, their restrictions, and their rebellions are all preserved in the folds of a kimono and the lacing of a suit of armor. These weren't just people in old clothes. They were individuals navigating a world of strict rules, using the very fabric on their backs to express who they were, who they wished they could be, and the society they built together. And that leads me to a final question for you, one I've been thinking about ever since we started this journey. If you could step back in time and experience life in feudal Japan for just one day, which outfit would you have wanted to wear? Would you choose the immense, symbolic power of the samurai in full battle armor, feeling the weight of your duty and your lineage in every lacquered plate? Or would you opt for the refined, artistic expression of a court noble, composing a seasonal poem with the layered colors of your robes? Maybe the practical, comfortable freedom of the townsman's casual yukata appeals to you, or perhaps you'd be fascinated by the intense, hidden world of the ninja, whose greatest fashion statement was to wear no statement at all. Let me know your choice down in the comments. I read every single one, and absolutely love hearing which of these incredible historical garments captured your imagination. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure into the lost language of feudal